Perfect. Thank you very, very much. And now, well, we're very happy to have Dr. Prasad as our keynote speaker this year, since he is not only a fantastic person and a talented academic, but he also directed Christian's and my dissertation a few years back. And before he begins, please let me tell you a little bit more about him. So Ash's research interests broadly focus on gender and diversity issues in organizations, interpretive methods, and social inequality. He has published multiple books and about 50 journal articles. He has held tenured academic appointments at universities in Australia, Canada, and Mexico. His past and ongoing research has been funded as principal or sole investigator by grants from the British Academy, Consejo Nacional de Ciencia y Tecnología, and the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. He holds a number of editorial positions, including Associate Editor at Human Relations, Associate Editor at Qualitative Research in Organizations and Management, Research Integrity Editor at Journal of Business Ethics, and Reviews Editor at Organization. He is the outgoing co-chair of the Critical Management Studies Division at the Academy of Management. In 2012, he earned his PhD in Organization Studies from York University Schulich School of Business in Canada. Today, his talk is titled In Defense of Journal Quality Lists, and we're all very, very excited to hear it. Welcome, Ash. Thank you for being here with us. The session is all yours.
There we go. I needed to unmute myself. Thank you, Paulina and Christian, for inviting me. Thank you to Analk University for hosting this conference once more. And of course, to Albert Mills, who has been a mentor of mine for many, many years, for creating this venue. And just so you guys know, Albert was sat on my dissertation committee several years ago when I was working on my doctorate. So as some of you know, my technology skills are very limited. So Paulina, how are we doing this in terms of the slides?
Just say next and I'll next it.
Okay, sure. So so what I wanted to do today is talk about a project that I've been sort of mulling over in my mind for quite some time. And it's to revisit the virtues, merits of journal quality lists. Using, which is quite contrary to what I previously written about. In fact, the argument is antithetical to what I previously argued. So I decided to distill some of my ideas into presentation form. And you're gonna learn a little bit about where my current thinking is. And hopefully we can treat this like a conversation and you can tell me if I've kind of got this all wrong, or if you think that there might be merits in some of the things that I'm saying. I'm completely open to feedback, and I would love to have this more conversational than anything. Again, I'm preparing this as a paper, but I tried to distill my ideas, the essence of my ideas, into presentation form. So what I'm going to talk about is what the title indicates, In Defense of Journal Quality Lists. So Paulina, can we go into the next slide? So relevant biographical details, Paulina kind of went over this. I am currently a full professor and Canada Research Chair. One of the things that I had not mentioned, that was not mentioned in the biographical details, is I'm currently the chair of the Tenure and Promotions Committee at my university, and this will become relevant as we go forward. And I'm the associate editor of a number of well-ranked, using several journal quality lists, number of well-ranked journals. And I'm the outgoing chair of the CMS division at AOM. Paulina, can we go on to the next slide, please? I think I have prepared 11 slides. So I want to position myself to capture where my argument is coming from in this presentation. So that before we even begin as to how I got to my current thinking, I want to describe who I am and what are some of my experiences that led me to where my thinking is today. Okay, So this argument offered in this presentation is based on myself as a racialized minority within a hegemonically white academy, an academic with an appointment in the Global South. So for those of you who don't know, I am a Canadian national, but I hold permanent residency in Mexico, and I've been with a Mexican university for a number of years. As Paulina indicated, I was Paulina's advisor. I was Christian's advisor at Tecnológico de Monterrey, IGADE Business School. So I have quite a bit of experience in the Global South. And I was a supervisor of multiple doctoral students from or based in the Global South. So in fact, to date, all of my doctoral students that I've supervised to completion or am actively supervising as their primary advisor have either been a woman, racialized minority, and or based in the Global South. Actually, they've all been based in or from the Global South. So this is where I'm coming from. These are some of my experiences that led me to think what I'm thinking today and what you're going to hear during this presentation. Paulina, can we go on to the next slide, please? So evolution of my thinking on journal quality list. So early stage doctoral student and early career researcher years. So just to provide some context to this, I started my doctoral program at the Schulich School of Business at York University in 2006. The Schulich School of Business is a really interesting place. It's a fantastic business school to do one's doctorate. You know, I reflect back on my doctoral student experience with very nostalgic feelings. Anybody who knows me knows I'm a very, very proud Schulich graduate. In fact, I think in all of my biographies, I always make sure I list that that's where I came from. But there was a lot of, immediately when you entered the doctoral program at Schulich, you were inundated with a lot of institutional pressures coming at you from everywhere, from all the professors, all your course professors, your advisors, about the need to publish and to publish in high quality journals. These institutional pressures very quickly became ubiquitous within the business school. And it was quite different from my previous discipline, which was in political science, where the pressures certainly were not nearly as conspicuous as what they were once I got into the business school. So very quickly, for example, one piece of advice I received from an advisor was you need to write for a journal. So you don't write what's important to you, you need to write for a journal. So you should know what your targeted journal is before you even start the paper, which is not how I was trained in political science. So it caused a lot of a chasm in my intellectual development the moment I stepped into the PhD program. So I slowly began writing on the detrimental impact of journal quality list while I was in the early stages of the PhD program at York. I ultimately published 2 journal articles on how journal quality lists affect doctoral students. The first appeared in Organization, and the second appeared in Critical Perspectives on Accounting a couple of years later. And then that ultimately culminated in a book on the phenomenon that was published a year after that, Contesting Institutional Hegemony in Today's Business School, Doctoral Students Speak Out. So Paulina, can we go on to the next slide? So I'll very briefly capture what the argument is in those papers. So this paper was never intended, so this paper appeared in Organization, Playing the Game and Trying Not to Lose Myself, a doctoral student's perspective on the institutional pressures for research output. This is the one paper, till this day, I still consistently get unsolicited emails from doctoral students who are starting their PhD program or who are currently in the doctoral program, telling me how much they've enjoyed this paper and how much it resonated with them. It was never meant to be published. So I began writing very almost diary style notes about how I was feeling during the doctoral program. and I would write a little bit for a couple of pages and I would put it away. And then maybe a year and a half later, I may go back to it and just write my feelings of what I was feeling as I was going through the process. And a chance meeting in 2011 at the Academy of Management um, um, with Martin Parker, who was at the time the editor-in-chief of Organization. I was seated next to him in one of the sessions, and we were talking about something, and this topic came up, and I'm like, oh yeah, I've been writing about this. So, and I remember distinctly, he kind of grabs hold of my arm. This is before COVID, so it was all okay. He grabs a hold of my arm. He's like, you got to send this to Organization. Like, this is fantastic. The paper, of course, was not done because it was never intended to be a paper. I remember going back to my hotel room and frantically writing to try to prepare a paper. When Martin Parker asks you to submit a paper to Organization, you do it. So that was that's what ultimately came out in 2013. And I'll very briefly capture the argument. So working from a doctoral student's perspective, in the first article, what I tried to illuminate were the institutional pressures for journal quality list-based research output becomes discursively codified. So what are the different ways in which the institution begins to pressure doctoral students into gearing their work for publications in highly ranked journals? I argued that one of the especially sad implications, one of the outcomes from these pressures for publications in journal quality lists is intellectual inertia. That is, we all begin writing and talking about the same things rather than actually being innovative and creative and trying something different and experimenting and subverting the ethos that currently exists and structures our field. The article concludes with some consideration of how our discipline can more fruitfully serve doctoral students by redefining the meaning of success. So my argument is that we need to redefine success. What does it mean to be a successful academic in the field? As I conclude, redefining success will provide a constructive way to move beyond the orthodoxy of how research output is defined and valued. I'm going to hopefully talk about an interaction that I had with a colleague of mine at Schulich that really created some of my rethinking. So Paulina, can we go on to the next slide though, before we do that? Paulina?
That's the next slide.
Oh, sorry, it is the next slide. Thank you. Liminal transgressions, or where should the critical academy go from here? Reimagining the future of doctoral education to engender research sustainability, which appeared in 2015 in Critical Perspectives in Accounting. So I look at journal rankings, how they're becoming increasingly institutionalized in business schools throughout the world. So by this point in time, by the time I began working on this paper, I was already based in Mexico. So I was at Tecnológico de Monterrey. And what was really interesting for me was to see how the same conversations that I had heard in Canada, and prior to that, I had moved to Australia to take on my first job. What I was hearing in Australia was very similar to what I began to experience and hear in Mexico, with slight variations, but the overall narrative remained intact. So the logical outcome this phenomenon is the proliferation of a set of institutional pressures cast on scholars to produce research that will be published in journals that count. So when I say there's variations throughout the world in terms of expectations on scholars, on professors, on PhD students to produce research in journals that count, the variation just is differentiated by which journals qualify as the journals that count. That's the only difference. But the institutional pressures themselves remain quite similar. Okay, so it depends on which journal list you're using or whatnot. One group that has been particularly implicated in the process are doctoral students. Doctoral students habitually encounter myriad discursive and coercive forces, which encourage them to pursue scholarship within a certain assemblage of paradigmatic boundaries, methodological approaches, and research parameters. So essentially what I'm arguing is that, they feel pressured by their institutions to publish research using a certain type of methods on a certain type of topic so that it will be attractive to the journals that matter to that institution. Focusing on the area of critical research, this article identified two trajectories by which to reimagine the future of critical doctoral education in these schools. One, reconstituting the role of senior professors in the field whose ontology and scholarship are inflected by a critical orientation, and pursuing concerted efforts to disengage with the mainstream. So this was a more of a radical argument. I said, let's just stop using the mainstream as our reference points. Let's just do our own thing. If you want to publish 8 articles in Ephemera, which is a fantastic journal, great, do that. Let's not use, AMJ or Org Studies or ASQ or Human Relations as our metrics for defining success. Let's do what we want to do. And I say that senior professors have to take a more active role in supporting that redefinition of success. Okay, so that was that paper. So Paulina, can we go on to the next slide, please? So ultimately, I decided to bring together a group of doctoral students and early career researchers together to prepare chapters for an edited book that I did, which came out as Contesting Institutional Hegemony in Today's Business Schools, Doctoral Students Speak Out. And so bringing together voices from doctoral students in different parts of the world to consider how they experience and negotiate institutional pressure. So from a very first person narrative perspective, how did these individuals experience the institutional pressures at their institutions, and how did they respond to it? How did they deal with things like the imposter syndrome? How did they navigate, things that happen in life, like a major health issue? How did, being located in the global South, how did they then negotiate trying to publish in journals that are very English, Anglophone orientated? So all of these things, it was a super fascinating book to look at what the challenges other doctoral students had during their programs. So can we go on to the next slide? So let's just very summarize the critique against journal quality lists, because it's quite within the critical community, which is where I'm located. Nobody writes about the merits of journal quality lists. Nothing that I've seen to date. Everybody criticizes, and we're talking about people like myself, all the way up to like people like Hugh Wilmot. They've all just destroyed journal quality lists over and over again, to the point that the arguments are now becoming a bit redundant. Management researchers have long observed the problematic outcomes engendered by the institutionalization of journal quality list, including, among other things, the narrowing of paradigmatic boundaries that demarcate social phenomenon worthy of academic study, and concomitantly what research questions and phenomenon can be posed and how such research questions can be empirically approached. These researchers have identified not only how journal quality linked outcomes fail to respond to grand societal challenges, so that is, they're not actually addressing the issues that affect the material conditions of people's lives, but also how their detrimental effects are disproportionately borne by doctoral students, early career researchers, and other disenfranchised constituents within the academy. So the idea is that journal quality lists are overall negative, and they have a disproportionate impact on disenfranchised subjects. So in this presentation, without wholly repudiating the merits of this line of critique, in fact, I've been part of the community that has made and advanced this critique, I want to offer an alternative reading to journal quality list. I want to consider the subversive potential of journal quality lists. That is there any agency that is yielded from these journal quality lists? So Paulina, can we go on to the next slide, please? A change is going to come. I was actually listening to Sam Cooke this morning as I was putting the final touches on this presentation. So I'm going to very briefly describe, because I think that I should give credit to where credit is due. When I was working well, I was still at the Schulich School of Business, and I was working, when Mark Parker had extended an invitation to write the Playing the Game and Trying Not to Lose Myself paper. I had a conversation with a colleague of mine, Majid Abdi, who's now a senior lecturer at the University of Sydney Business School, and who was the doctoral program with me at Schulich. And the conversation was really really interesting, because I was criticizing journal quality lists, and I'm saying, this is what I'm arguing, and this is how I'm positioning my argument. And he kind of looked at me with some level of amusement, and he said, I love journal quality list. And I'm like, how could you love journal quality lists? It's so terrible for A, B, C reasons. And he said, well, Ash, it's really easy for you. And him and I are really good friends. We're really quite good friends. It's easy for someone like you to be making the argument that you're making. Somebody who, although you're a racialized minority, you're a Canadian, you don't speak with an accent. You pick up on social cues well, because you were raised in the country. So it's easy for you to say, oh, journal quality lists suck. But in fact, for someone like myself, who's an Iranian, speaks with an accent, and for various other reasons, I love these lists, because when you and I are in the job market, even though we're in different fields, when you and I are in the job market, my top journal publications is what's gonna help me secure that job. So even though you have all of the non-tangibles in your corner working for you, in my corner, I'm going to have my top level publications, and I'll be able to secure a job. I'll be able to leverage that to secure a job. So that was really the first time somebody presented that argument to me. And so Paulina, can we go on to the next slide? So change is going to come in my thinking. So let's again focus on the reality of our discipline. Relative to other social science disciplines, business school fields are research output orientated. Again, I came from political science. I never experienced the level of instrumentality that is experienced by, that I saw in the business school. Like instrumentality that is everybody, not everybody, but most people seem to be only interested in you and your thinking to the degree that they can yield top level publications. There's not a, let's just have a conversation. Nobody asked me when I arrived in Australia at my first appointment, nobody would ever ask me, what are you working on? Like, what are you working on? They'd ask me, where have you published? Nobody cares about the content of the work. It's more about what you publish. So research output is measured stringently using journal quality list. We have an institutionalized culture of publish or perish. To kind of really get our minds around this View, Nancy Adler and Anwil Harzing had a paper in 2009 in the Academy of Management Learning and Education, where they actually use this quote. When you attend the Academy of Management and you hear doctoral students and early career researchers talk amongst themselves, it's not like there's the professor who does research on this topic that's really interesting for these reasons. It's not that. What you'll often hear is there's the professor who has an AMJ, 2 AMRs, and an ASQ. It's very much, we use these journal rankings as heuristics for quality. So we don't actually have to read the work or actually understand the content of the work, but just that it hit the right places. This is from a personal conversation I had with a very dear friend of mine from the UK. You write your own ticket with a 4x4. So in the UK, the ABS list is what runs the game, and their ratings are based on 4, 3, 2, 1. So journals with a 4 rating is considered top tier. So if you published 4 articles in the past 4 years, you pretty much write your own ticket. You're going to get a job. You're going to get a really nice cushy job. You're probably going to get a chair. You write your own ticket. So these are some of the realities of the business school game we're in. Next slide, please. Okay, so journal quality list. Is there subversive potential? And that's what I really am trying to explore in the paper that I'm preparing, as well as the topic of this presentation. So the fetishization of journal quality lists, a term that has been really popularized by Hugh Wilmot in his 2012 organization paper, can be used strategically. Can it be used strategically by disenfranchised subject? So in the spirit of engaging autoethnography, I want to capture, I want to go back to sort of as some of my own personal experiences. So my first appointment was at the Australian Graduate School of Management at the University of New South Wales. They hired me sight unseen. By that, they invited, they said, if you want a trip to Sydney, Australia, we'll give it to you. Like, you can come and you don't need to give a talk. They literally interviewed me and you have a job. And it was a really nice offer with incredible perks, low teaching and so forth. I really didn't understand why they would have done that. Once I got to the Australian Graduate School of Management, and the Australian Graduate School of Management, this was in 2010, was a top 50 business school in the world as deemed by the Financial Times 100 list. It was rated 32nd in that year. I wanted to finally explore, like, why did they hire me? Like, why were they interested, and why did they so aggressively go after me? The feedback I received was unequivocal. You had a sole authored human relations. It's an A-star journal in our country, in Australia. You had a sole authored one. We wanted you. Every single person that they hired that year, Ricardo Flores had a JIBS, and Hawk Yu Hoing had an ASQ. They only were interested. They pretty much said, we looked at all the applications. Those applications that did not have A-star publications went into one pile. Those applications that did have A-star publications went to another. And it was that human relations that got you the job. So very instrumental. They didn't really care about what I was working on. I think that, the school would probably cringe at the thought of what I was working on if they actually saw what I was working on, but I had that. When it came to my first promotion within the same school, I was going up for tenure, and I was going up for promotion. What was really interesting is when I arrived at the AGSM, they gave me a folder, and in that folder, they said what would be required to get support from the faculty for your promotion and tenure. And it was very clear. You needed another A-star publication while you were there, and you needed at least 3 other publications in, I think it was A-level journals. The moment I secured that, there was no further conversations about whether we're going to support you or not, whether we're going to support your promotion application or not. The answer was absolutely. You got it. And then the tenure track record of my former doctoral students. So again, I mentioned all my current and former doctoral students are women, racialized minority, or based in the global south. I guess not my current doctoral students, but all my former doctoral students were based in the global south or from there. And I will tell you, one of the stats that I'm most proud of is every single PhD student that has graduated under my primary supervision has secured tenure track positions. So now, bringing all of these 3 points, my first appointment, my first promotion, and the tenure track record of my former doctoral students, what do I want to say? So we'll get that to in the next slide. So now I'm in a position to help others advance in their career. Paulina, can we go on to the next slide, please? So my argument is that you can actually leverage journal quality list to your benefit. That even if you're a racialized other, if you occupy any marginalized subjectivities, if you speak with an accent, if you're from the global south, one of the one of the hidden benefits of having business schools run with a great degree of instrumentality is that your journal articles then can be used to protect you from discrimination. it's a really interesting and powerful uh, powerful way of looking at things. So my argument is, in the paper that I'm preparing, I contend that journal quality lists possess subversive potential to the extent that they can be invoked to objectively assert the legitimacy of a racialized, or I'm coming at it from a racialized person, or any socially disenfranchised subject's presence within the academy, which may be otherwise negated as a consequence of the tacit contours of racism that structures the myriad institutions governing academia today. So regardless of of all that you might experience in terms of discrimination and so forth, if you publish in top journals, that cannot be denied eventually. That will be recognized. So again, if we, Paulina, can we briefly go back to the previous slide? I guess I should have included the last statement. Now in a position to help others advance their careers. I will tell you that in the last year and a half, I have done a lot less research writing than I normally do. And that's just because the editorial appointments came at me all at once for some reason. So I got involved with human relations, journal business ethics, gender work and organization. In a very short period of time, I got the invitations. And I kept thinking, each of them, when they came, I told myself, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. I remember having a conversation with Gabby DeRepos, who's a contemporary of mine and who's a former student of Albert Mills. And she was just finishing her term as associate editor at Academy of Management Learning and Education. And it was in part like seeing what she's done with her involvement at a top journal that led me to accept the position at Human Relations. And then when it came to the other appointments, I'm like, I'm actually now in a position where I can help. One of my mentors uses the term shepherd. Shepherd works along in high quality journals that would advance these individuals' careers that otherwise may not be published. So I'm in a position to actually, in my own very small way, to help others place their works in places that otherwise may not have been placed, just by being a little bit more open-minded, finding the right reviewers, providing the right constructive comments, and so forth. Okay, so Paulina, can we go on to, so that's essentially my argument that I'm trying to make, that journal quality lists, yes, we should be critical about a lot of dimensions of JQLs. There's a lot of negatives that are yielded. But there is a silver lining that we can point to. And as somebody who occupies various marginalized subjectivities, I'm beginning to notice these things. I'm beginning to go, beginning to say, wait a minute, there are some benefits here that can be yielded. Okay, can we go on to my next slide, Paulina? Okay, so final takeaways. This is more generic in nature. You guys, I think all of you are doctoral students in this room, most of you other than the organizers and the exec members. Be ambitious. So these are things that have worked for me, I think, over the duration of my career, other than leveraging journal quality lists. Be ambitious. My first interaction with Albert, you may or may not recall this, actually was with Albert and Jean, was I won the best paper award in the social responsibility division at ASAC in May 2008. And in August at the Academy of Management in Chicago, I won the best student paper award. In both, I think in both conferences for the respective divisions, Albert was the chair, but he was the person who actually gave me the award. That I distinctly remember. And I remember leaving the Academy of Management in August 2008 and going, wow, this was a great experience. I love Albert's work. I'm going to reach out to him and suggest we do a special issue at the Journal of Business Ethics together. I was a second-year doctoral student. I'm like, the worst that could happen is he says no. but I'm going to reach out and suggest it. And Albert, much to his grace, agreed to do the proposal with me, and we ultimately published a special issue of the Journal of Business Ethics before I was even out of the PhD program. So be ambitious within reason, know your capacity, but always strive to that next level. Find your tribe, find your community of scholars. Um, um, the best thing I could have done is attend the Academy of Management and get into the critical management studies community and know these members and be mentored by a lot of these incredible, thoughtful scholars. The Academy of Management, like a lot of other faculty, like a lot of large conferences, is really big. But once you're able to find and the field generally is really large, but once you're able to find your community and enter into that community, it becomes manageable, and it in fact can become very supportive. Always understand that the field is more than your institution. Whether I was in Canada or Australia or Mexico or back in Canada, I don't use the reference points of my local university as the reference points that I use to target my work or that determines the measures of my success. For example, when I got to Tecnológico de Monterrey at Agave Business School, the big thing there was you need to publish in Q1 journals. And I'm like, what are Q1 journals? Okay, Scopus Q1s, but it's a massive number of journals. Many of them are things I've never heard of. I could have easily have turned around 20 publications a year. I really could have if I wanted to play that game. It would have then made me popular within that institution, but not so much the field. So try to find out what is the measures of success for your field and decide whether you want to actually accept them or not. But if you do, try to figure out what is it for the field rather than your institution. I'm currently at this tiny little university in Canada that most people have never heard of. Which it's great in many respects, but I don't use their measures of success to determine the decisions I make pertaining to for my career. Okay. So if you're going to acquiesce to, I'm trying to summarize this point. If you are going to acquiesce to the norms of your field rather than your institution at which you are located, because we all move from one institution to another. The school that you're at today may not be the school that you're going to be at tomorrow. And they may have their own set of boundaries. So in my mind, I know exactly what I target. I try to publish on average 1 A-star journal a year on average, and a certain number of A's. And then the rest of my work, I try to contribute to the journals where I want to really have conversations in. Follow your passion, a key example. Always do research on the things that you're passionate about, because if you're passionate about something, it shows in the work. If you don't have passion for this on a particular topic and you're just trying to write to get published, it will show up in your work. So pick a topic that really you get enlivened by, you get woken up by, you want to read on that topic, you want to write on that topic and pursue it. And finally, if COVID has taught us anything, as one of the previous speakers pointed out, keep things in perspective. This is a job at the end of the day. It may be a paycheck, it may be a career. It's not be all, end all. There are other things that are more important. Certainly there are other things that are more important. So keep, when you get that rejection decision letter, keep it in perspective. Yeah, and so that's essentially what I have to discuss today, which is let's reimagine journal quality list. Is there any potential? And let's try to potentially use journal quality list to our advantage, especially if you occupy marginalized subjectivities. So Paulina, that's that for my presentation.
Thank you very much, Ash. So now we would like to open the space for questions or comments. you're getting some clapping, but you know, soon. Okay, so okay.
Ash, I
Somebody-
want to help the PhD students. Maybe they nobody wants to throw the first question, but what would be the like if I was a PhD student and I was writing my dissertation, and I'm also thinking on having a career on having my first article published journal, what you were talking about, what's your number one recommendation for a PhD student? That it's writing his dissertation, her dissertation, and it's actually thinking on sending maybe part of that dissertation to a journal. What's your take on that?
Yeah,
and then
so,
I hope everybody throws some other questions, but I just wanted to start the questions that and I leave you to it. I'm sorry.
fantastic. So I always leave the decision about how to approach the dissertation. I mean, Paulina and Christian are both my former doctoral students, so they would know this, to them. I always do tell them the two options for a dissertation, which is the traditional monograph or the 3 essay model. Now, I did the 3 essay model because I wanted to, in the business school, again, books are just less valued than journal articles. I did the 3 essay model. I tell them the merits and the downside of each. All of my former doctoral students have also followed the 3 essay model, and so they've all been able to successfully place their work. Identify a topic that is of interest to you. Work with somebody who has been there and done that, so that they can enable you to get there. So Paulina was one of my more recent doctoral students. If she had come to me and said, "Hey, Ash, I want to publish in ASQ," my response to her would have been, "I've never published in ASQ. I don't think I have the skills to get there. You should find somebody who can help you get there." Now, if she comes to me and she says, "I want to publish in work studies or human relations organization," okay, I got you covered. I know exactly what it takes to get into these journals. Let's talk. So I think that's working with somebody who's been there, and that may be looking outside your institution. Attending conferences either virtually or in person, trying to start those conversations. And it's, some people are not so nice, but there's a lot of people that if you reach out to them and if you show interest in their work, they're going to be really interested in doing what they can to support you. So yeah, so I mean, that would be it. The other thing, I think that one piece of advice that was pretty good that I received in the doctoral program is find a scholar whose work you really like. You really enjoy reading their work. It enlivens you and so forth. I when my first year doctoral professor told me this, I came to there's a scholar in management communication called Karen Lee Ashcraft, and I remember reading her papers and I'm going, "Oh, this is awesome! Like, I love this writing style. I love this approach. Blah blah blah." And my professor said, "Fantastic! Emulate that. Of course, have your own content, but look at how she constructs her argument. Look at how she does this. Look at how she frames she positions herself, how she unravels the argument that she's trying to make, and then try to emulate that and constantly writing and rewriting and rewriting." And so that was super helpful.
Thank you, Ash. Now we have the following question. Heiko raised his hand. Heiko, please.
Hi, Ash. Thanks for the talk, and I really like the silver lining of actually having something that can signal, if you come from a disadvantaged community, that that you can do the work, right? But I was wondering when I was listening to you talk, like the assumption is that you can actually get a publication in one of these top journals.